The wind howled like a warning across the mountain cliff, tearing at Rhaenys's red hair as it whipped free from its braid under the swollen moon. Alex's hands, once so warm, so careful, locked onto her shoulders with sudden iron strength. She laughed, the sound small and shaky, still blindfolded and waiting for the birthday surprise he had promised, her voice light with the trust that had always come so easily to her. "Where's the gift, Alex?" she asked, tilting her head playfully even as a tiny thread of unease curled in her stomach. "You said it was up here, just for us." His breath brushed her ear, close and familiar. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The words landed like frost on bare skin. Before she could turn, before she could even form the question, he shoved, hard, deliberate, final. Her body pitched forward into nothing. A red hair streamed behind her like fire against the night sky. The blindfold slipped just enough for hazel eyes, wide, disbelieving, shimmering with sudden terror, to catch the moonlit drop below, the black river waiting like an open mouth. She clawed at air, a scream ripping from her throat, raw and animal as gravity claimed her. The fall lasted forever and no time at all. She struck the water like a stone thrown by a furious god. Cold exploded through every inch of her, sharp, merciless, stealing breath she didn't have. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, soft and clear as if the woman stood beside her even now. "Trust, but never blindly, my girl." The memory stabbed deeper than the water. Rhaenys thrashed, arms flailing, legs kicking uselessly against the current that dragged her under. She had never learned to swim more than a few clumsy strokes. Queens didn't need to. They had guards. They had mates. They had trust. Her wolf surged inside her chest, howling in panic, claws scraping at ribs as if it could tear free and save them both. The bond she had once thought unbreakable pulsed once, twice, then flickered like a dying flame. Memories assaulted her in the dark. Alex's perfect smile when he first knelt before her throne, the way his lips had brushed hers and made her giggle like a girl who had never ruled a pack. His hands gentle on her waist during moonlit runs, his voice low and promising forever. All of it lies, all of it leading to this moment, her birthday, her mate, her death. Lungs burned, vision tunneled. The river pulled harder, greedy, whispering that it was easier to stop fighting. She thought of her pack waiting back at the hall, still laughing over birthday wine. She thought of Elsa, her closest friend, the blonde hair she used to braid with ribbons. She thought of the elders who had never fully accepted a petite red-headed queen who ruled without a king, and how they would whisper now that she had vanished on a night meant for celebration. Her wolf gave one last, desperate cry inside her. Then darkness rushed in, cold and complete, and the river took what was left. Rhaenys woke to the faint, bitter taste of healing herbs coating her tongue and the cold, unmistakable clink of metal biting into her wrists. She lay on thick, soft furs spread across a wide stone bed in a room carved from pale gray rock, beautiful in its stark way, with narrow arched windows letting in slivers of pale dawn light and a single iron brazier crackling low in the corner. Her riding clothes were gone, replaced by a simple white linen gown that fell soft against her skin. The screaming agony from the river impact had dulled to a deep, throbbing ache, external bruises blooming under her flesh, internal wounds far worse, raw and gaping where trust used to live. She tested the chains, short, heavy, anchored to the bed frame, and panic flickered fresh in her chest, sharp enough to steal her breath. This wasn't a nightmare. She was alive, and someone had decided she should stay that way. The door opened quietly. A young maid slipped inside, small, dark-haired, eyes downcast, carrying a tray with a steaming cup. She set it on a low table, then bowed low, the motion practiced and deep. "Where am I?" Rhaenys's voice came out hoarse, cracked from disuse and river water. The maid straightened just enough to speak. "You are in the Riverfang stronghold, my lady. Our fishermen pulled your body from the rapids, unconscious, half drowned. Alpha Darius recognized you at once, the queen of the Silver Peak. He ordered you brought here, given care, and secured. She glanced at the chains with quiet apology. For safety. Yours and ours. Rhaenys's hazel eyes narrowed, the ache in her chest twisting tighter. Safety. The word tasted like mockery. Before she could demand more, the heavy door swung open again. A woman entered like she owned every inch of shadow in the room. Tall, long-limbed, black hair falling in glossy waves past her shoulders, framing a face carved from moonlight and steel. Gwen. Alpha Darius's sister. She wore dark leather breeches and a fitted tunic the color of midnight, a thin silver torquay at her throat catching the brazier light. Her eyes, storm gray, sharp, swept over Rhaenys with cool, unhurried curiosity, as though evaluating a blade rather than a person. Gwen crossed the room in 3 strides and sat on the edge of the bed without asking permission. Up close, she smelled faintly of pine smoke and leather, her presence filling the space like a held breath. The maid bowed again and retreated, leaving them alone. Gwen tilted her head, studying the red-headed queen chained to her brother's bed. "What does the queen of the Silver Peak want with Riverfang territory?" she asked, voice low and smooth, edged with something that wasn't quite hostility, yet. Rhaenys met that gaze and felt the first real spark of fury cut through the numbness. Her wrists pulled against the iron, the ache in her ribs flaring, but she refused to look away. "I didn't come here," she said, each word deliberate, trembling only at the edges. "I was thrown here." Gwen's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "Thrown," she repeated softly. Rhaenys swallowed, the memory surging back unbidden. Alex's whisper, the shove, the endless fall, the river's cold fist closing around her. Tears stung hot behind her lids, but she blinked them back. Queens didn't cry in front of strangers, not even when everything inside them had already shattered. Gwen said nothing for a long moment. Then she leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees, and regarded Rhaenys like she was seeing her for the first time. "Furious looks better on you," she said at last. Rhaenys let out a short, broken laugh that hurt her throat. "That's all I have left." Gwen stood slowly, the movement fluid and unhurried. "Rest well." She paused at the door, glancing back with those storm-gray eyes. "And try not to punch the guards. Darius finds it amusing. The guards don't." The door closed with a soft thud. Rhaenys stared at the iron cuffs on her wrists, then at the narrow window where the first true light of morning bled through. Alive. Chained. The next morning, light slanted through the narrow windows in thin golden bars across the stone floor. Rhaenys had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the river rushed back, cold and hungry, Alex's whisper echoing louder than the chains clinking against her wrists. She sat propped against the firs, knees drawn up, staring at nothing, when the door opened again. Gwen entered this time wearing a deep emerald dress that hugged her tall frame like liquid shadow, the fabric shimmering faintly as she moved. Her black hair was loose today, catching the light in glossy waves, and a thin silver chain rested against her collarbone. She looked less like a warrior and more like someone who had chosen softness for the day, yet her storm-gray eyes were still sharp, still measuring. She crossed the room without a word and sat on the edge of the bed again, closer than yesterday, the faint scent of pine and wildflowers drifting from her skin. Rhaenys lifted her gaze slowly. "You dress like you're going to a feast," she said quietly, voice rough from disuse. Gwen's lips curved, not quite a smile. "I quite enjoy being in your company, Rhaenys." She paused, tilting her head. "I admire you, the way you ruled alone, the way you made men bow when they wanted to laugh. But I don't trust you. Not yet." Rhaenys let out a small, tired breath that almost passed for a laugh. "You're very smart for that." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Two women who had both carried power like a blade, both learned that trust was a luxury few could afford. Then Rhaenys's expression shifted. She stared at Gwen hard, my hazel eyes darkening, voice cracking open like thin ice. "How long have I been unconscious?" Gwen didn't flinch. 1 year and 2 months, she answered casually, as if stating the weather. The words landed like a second fall, harder, deeper, stealing the air from Rhaenys's lungs. She went still, completely still. The room seemed to shrink around her, the braziers crackle suddenly too loud, the chains suddenly too heavy. 1 year, 2 months. Her birthday had come and gone 13 times without her. Her pack had mourned her, celebrated without her, moved on without her. And Alex, her mate, her love, the man whose kisses once made her feel safe, had lived every single day of that time believing or pretending he had succeeded. The silence stretched until it hurt. Then something inside Rhaenys snapped. She exploded. She lunged against the cuffs, iron biting into skin, thrashing like a trapped animal, screams tearing from her throat raw and ragged. "He has to pay! That traitor has to pay!" Her voice cracked higher, breaking on every word. "I have to get back! I have to get back to my pack!" Tears streamed hot down her cheeks, mixing with the fury, the grief, the disbelief. She didn't care that Gwen saw. She didn't care that queens weren't supposed to shatter like this. All she could feel was the hollow where trust used to live, now filled with nothing but rage and the ghost of a bond that had never been real. Gwen's eyes widened, the cool mask cracking for the first time. She had been to the Silver Peak once, standing beside her brother at a border council, but watching the petite red-headed queen command a room full of doubting elders and warriors without raising her voice. That woman had been steel wrapped in silk, unshakable. This woman, sobbing, screaming, chains rattling, was the same one, and the pain pouring out of her could not be faked. Gwen turned sharply toward the door as the young maid slipped in with fresh water. "Out!" she ordered, voice low but final. The maid bowed and vanished. Gwen moved closer on the bed, one hand hovering near Rhaenys's shoulder, not touching, not yet. "Breathe," she said quietly. "Breathe." Rhaenys's thrashing slowed to shuddering gasps. She slumped forward, forehead against her chained hands, tears dripping onto the white gown. Gwen waited until the worst of the storm passed. Then softer. "Rest. The council meeting is tomorrow. My brother will hear every word. And when he does..." She let the sentence hang, heavy with promise. "He'll decide what happens next." Rhaenys lifted her head just enough to meet Gwen's gaze again, red-rimmed, exhausted, but burning. "Tell him this," she whispered, voice hoarse and lethal. "Tell him the Queen of the Silver Peak is awake, and she is done being dead." Gwen nodded once, slow and solemn, then rose. As she reached the door, she paused, looking back over her shoulder. "Tomorrow," she said. The door closed. Rhaenys stared at the empty space where Gwen had been, the ache in her chest no longer just bruises. It was fury, pure, living fury. And for the first time since the river, her wolf inside her lifted its head and answered with a low, dangerous growl. The next morning came too soon, the stone room still dim when 6 guards filed in, tall, armored, faces carved from the same granite as the walls. They moved without ceremony, keys clinking as they unlocked the cuffs from Rhaenys's wrists. The iron fell away with a dull thud, leaving red rings on her skin like brands she hadn't asked for. She rubbed her wrists once, slow and deliberate, then rose without a word. They marched her through torchlit corridors that smelled of smoke and damp stone, boots echoing in perfect rhythm, her bare feet silent against the cold floor. The great council chamber opened before them like a cavern of judgment, high, vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, long table of dark wood scarred from centuries of decisions, torches spitting light across banners of river and fang. At the far end sat Darius on his throne of blackened oak and iron, legs crossed casually, one hand resting on the arm as though this were nothing more than a mourning audience. He was even more imposing in daylight, All black tunic, rugged jaw shadowed with stubble, buzz-cut dark hair sharp against his skull, brown eyes the color of deep, cold honey, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, promising both warmth and ruin. The guards shoved her forward to the center of the room. "Kneel," one barked. Rhaenys planted her feet. "No!" The guard closest lunged, hand clamping her shoulder to force her down. She moved faster, petite frame twisting, fist snapping up in a clean arc. Her knuckles connected with his nose. Cartilage crunched, blood sprayed in a bright arc across the stone. He staggered back with a choked curse, hand flying to his face. The chamber went deathly still. Rhaenys straightened, red hair falling wild around her shoulders, hazel eyes blazing as she met Darius's gaze head-on. "I am a queen," she said, voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "I kneel for no one." Darius's lips curved into a slow, wicked smile, dangerous, almost amused. He lifted one hand in a lazy wave. "Stand down." The guards retreated, the injured one wiping blood with his sleeve, glaring but silent. Darius rose then, unfolding from the throne with predatory grace. He walked toward her, slow, deliberate, circling her like a wolf scenting prey. Up close he smelled of cedar smoke and mountain wind, his presence pressing against her skin even without touching. He completed the circle and stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the faint scar running along his jawline. They questioned her for hours. She answered everything, calm at first, then sharper, because she had no reason to lie. "I didn't come here because I felt like taking a vacation in someone else's pack," she said at last, voice low and cutting. "I have my own to care for." Darius's face darkened as she spoke, the casual amusement fading into something colder, harder. He stepped closer again, towering over her petite frame. Without warning, he reached out, fingers threading into her red hair, gripping a fistful at the nape. He yanked her head back, not cruelly but firmly, forcing her hazel eyes to meet his. "Why should we believe a single word?" he demanded, voice low, rumbling through the space between them. Rhaenys didn't flinch. Her breath came shallow, the ache in her chest flaring hot. "Does it make sense?" she asked. A voice cracking on the edges like thin ice giving way. That a queen would jump into a river to die? That I would throw myself away when I fought my whole life to be seen? The words hung there, raw and stripped bare. Tears welled but didn't fall. She refused to let them. In that suspended moment, Darius looked, really looked, and saw it, the shattered truth in her eyes. He held her gaze a heartbeat longer. Then slowly he released her hair, fingers sliding free with unexpected gentleness. He stepped back. The council chamber remained silent except for the crackle of torches. Darius returned to his throne, sat and regarded her with those deep, honey eyes, still cold but no longer mocking. "Take her back to her room," he said quietly to the guards. As they moved to escort her, Rhaenys turned once at the threshold, looking back over her shoulder. Darius's wicked smile returned, just a flicker, but this time it held something new. Respect and something else she couldn't name. Days blurred into one another, the stone room becoming both prison and strange sanctuary. Sunlight shifted across the floor in slow arcs, marking time Rhaenys no longer controlled. Gwen came often, sometimes in the emerald dress, sometimes in leather and boots, bringing books from the pack library, or simply sitting in silence while Rhaenys stared at the narrow window. Their conversations started small. The taste of Riverfang honey wine, the way mountain wolves howled different from forest ones, the quiet ache of ruling as a woman. Bit by bit, the words grew heavier, more honest. Gwen listened without pity, asked sharp questions, and never once looked at Rhaenys like she was broken. A fragile friendship took root in the cracks, two women with duties too heavy for one set of shoulders. Darius appeared less often, but when he did, the air changed. He never announced himself. He simply leaned against the far wall, arms crossed over his broad chest, his short brown hair catching the torchlight, brown eyes like cold honey fixed on her. He said almost nothing, sometimes a single word, sometimes only the weight of his gaze. Rhaenys felt it every time, not cruel, not kind, just unyielding, like he was waiting for her to reveal something she hadn't yet admitted even to herself. One afternoon, the silence finally cracked. Rhaenys sat on the edge of the bed, wrists free now, but the ghost of chains still itching her skin. She looked up as Darius stepped inside alone, no guards. A door closing softly behind him. He leaned against the wall as always, watching. "Let me go," she said, voice low but steady at first. Darius's lips curved into that familiar smirk, slow and dangerous. "And why should I release my favorite beautiful prisoner? The word, beautiful, landed soft but sharp, unexpected. Rhaenys felt heat rise in her cheeks despite everything. She pushed it down, desperation clawing up her throat instead. "Please," she said, quieter now, the plea tasting like ash. "I'll make a bargain, a ruler's oath. Release me, and the next time we meet I'll give you anything you ask. Anything." Darius laughed, low, rough, the sound vibrating through the stone room. For a moment, amusement flickered in those honey eyes. Then it faded. He straightened, crossed the space between them in 3 measured steps, and stopped just close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his gaze. He studied her, really studied her, the red hair falling in tangled waves, the shadowed hazel eyes, the lithe petite frame with curves burned into his memory. Then he spoke, voice serious, stripped of mockery. "Your mate sent word the moment my scouts confirmed you were alive," he said quietly. "A week after you washed up on our shore. He offered a fortune in gold, more than most packs see in a lifetime, to keep you here, locked away until his coronation passes in 3 days' time. He wants the throne clean, no loose queen returning to claim it." Rhaenys felt the floor tilt beneath her. The room narrowed to a pinpoint. 3 days. In 3 days, Alex would stand in her hall, wear her crown, sit on her throne, while she rotted here, forgotten, paid for like a secret to be buried. Her breath came short, ragged. He paid to keep me dead." Darius didn't move, didn't soften. "He paid to keep you gone." Tears burned behind her lids, but she refused them. Instead, she lifted her chin, meeting those cold honey eyes without flinching. "Then let me prove the bargain," she whispered. "Let me go. Let me take back what's mine. And when it's done, when I stand as queen again, I'll honor what I swore. Anything you ask." Darius held her gaze for a long, heavy moment. Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, not desire, but recognition. The look of one ruler seeing another who refused to stay broken. He reached out slowly, fingers brushing a stray lock of red hair from her cheek, gentle, almost careful, then let his hand drop. 3 days, he said at last. "You leave at dawn on the day he's crowned. Take my soldiers. Take what weapons you need. But know this, Rhaenys." His voice dropped lower, intimate and lethal. "If you break that oath, there won't be a river deep enough to hide you from me." She nodded once, throat tight. Darius turned toward the door, paused with his hand on the latch. "Rest," he said without looking back. "You'll need your strength." The door closed behind him. Rhaenys sat motionless for a long time after, the echo of his touch still warm on her cheek, the weight of the bargain settling like iron in her chest. 3 days. 3 days until she walked back into the hall that had once been hers. 3 days until she looked her mate in the eyes and reminded him what it cost to try to kill a queen. That night, the courtyard of Riverfang's stronghold lay open under a sky thick with stars, torches ringing the stone walls in flickering orange circles. Rhaenys stepped out into the cool mountain air, still wearing the simple white gown but now draped in a borrowed dark cloak that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. The chosen warriors waited, 20 of Darius's best, men and women in black leather and iron, faces shadowed under helms, eyes steady as they watched their unexpected guest approach. Their armor glinted sharp under the torchlight, spears and swords sheathed but ready. Rhaenys stopped before them, red hair loose and catching the fire glow like spilled blood. She met their gazes one by one, voice carrying clear and low across the open space. "We ride at dawn on the day the traitor crowns himself king of my pack," she said. "We go straight to the Silver Peak Great Hall. No detours, no mercy for those who believed his lies. If any of you hesitate, turn back now. I won't ask twice." Not one moved. A low murmur of assent rippled through them, fists thumping once against chests in salute. Rhaenys nodded once, sharp, grateful, and turned back toward the keep, the weight of their loyalty settling like armor she hadn't earned yet but would wear anyway. She returned to her room, exhaustion pulling at her limbs like river current. The furs on the bed looked almost welcoming now. She let the cloak fall, kicked off the borrowed boots, and sat on the edge to unlace the last of the ties on her gown when the door opened quietly. Gwen stepped inside. She wore full feminine war armor, crafted for a woman's frame but no less lethal. Eyes blackened steel plates curved over her shoulders and chest, etched with flowing carvings of rivers and snarling wolves that caught the brazier light and threw it back in silver sparks. A fitted skirt of overlapping leather scales hung to mid-thigh, allowing movement, and greaves hugged her calves like second skin. Her black hair was braided tight against her scalp, a single silver clasp at the nape. She carried a second set in her arms, smaller, tailored perfectly to Rhaenys's build, the same dark steel and riverwolf carvings glinting softly. Gwen crossed the room and laid the armor carefully on the foot of the bed. "I had it made for you," she said simply. "The moment my brother agreed to let you go. It's lighter than it looks, stronger than it needs to be." Rhaenys stared at the gleaming plates, throat tightening. No one had armed her since the day she took the throne alone. No one had believed she might need to fight her way back to it. She looked up at Gwen, tall, steady, storm-gray eyes softer in the low light than they had ever been. "Thank you," Rhaenys whispered. Gwen stepped closer. Without warning, she pulled Rhaenys into a fierce, brief hug, arms strong around her shoulders, armor cold against the thin gown, but the embrace warm with something real, something sisterly. Rhaenys froze at first, body stiff, unused to touch that wasn't betrayal or duty. Then slowly, hesitantly, her arms came up. She hugged Gwen back, fingers curling into the leather straps at her back, holding on for one long heartbeat longer than she meant to. When they parted, Gwen's expression was unreadable again, but her voice stayed soft. She turned toward the door. Nyr paused with her hand on the latch. "Good luck," she said quietly, the words carrying the same weight Darius had given them days earlier. Respect, warning, and something unspoken that felt almost like hope. The door closed behind her with a gentle click. Rhaenys stood alone in the flickering brazier light, staring at the war armor on the bed. She reached out, fingertips tracing the carved wolf on the breastplate, snarling, fierce, unbroken. That night, sleep came like a thief, stealing Rhaenys the moment her head touched the furs. The brazier had burned low, casting faint orange flickers across the stone walls, and the armor Gwen had given her lay, folded at the foot of the bed, like a silent promise. She drifted under without resistance, too exhausted to fight the pull. The dream opened on ancient ground. She stood on a wind-swept ridge high above a valley choked with mist. Below her, the old Silver Peak village burned, timbers cracking, smoke thick and black. Her ancestors' pack had lost their king in battle the day before. The body of the fallen ruler lay on a bier at the center of the square, surrounded by weeping warriors. But one figure refused to weep. A woman, tall, broad-shouldered, hair the same fierce red as Rhaenys's, stepped forward from the crowd. She wore battered armor streaked with blood, sword still in hand. The elders argued, voices rising, "A queen cannot rule alone. We need a king." She silenced them with a single look, hazel eyes blazing the same fire Rhaenys knew in her own mirror. "I will be your king," the woman declared, voice carrying over the crackle of flames. "I fought beside him, I buried him, I will lead you now." The pack hesitated. Then one by one they knelt, not in submission to weakness, but to strength forged in grief. The queen raised her sword to the moon, blood dripping from the blade, and howled, a sound that shook the stars. The pack answered. From that night forward, the Silver Peak line ruled through queens who earned their crowns in blood and fire, not birthright or marriage. The dream shifted. Rhaenys saw her mother, gentle, strong, red hair braided with silver threads, sitting beside her father's sickbed as fever took him. Her mother never cried in front of the pack, but that night she held Rhaenys close and whispered against her hair, "Trust, but never blindly, my girl. Power is not given, it is taken, and when it is taken from you, you take it back." Then the vision darkened. Both parents gone, poisoned in their sleep by rivals who could not stomach defeat. Rhaenys, barely 20, had stood at their pyre, the flames reflecting in her eyes as she swore the same vow her ancestor had. She would rule. She would make them respect her. And she did. She trained harder than any warrior. She listened to every elder's complaint and answered with facts, not fury. She turned muttering into grudging nods, fear into loyalty. The Silver Peak grew stronger, borders secured, hunts bountiful, pups fed and trained. They called her the Red Queen behind her back at first, then to her face, with pride. Then Alex appeared. The dream softened for a moment, wrapping her in warmth she almost forgot she had once known. Moonlight on a forest clearing. Their first meeting. Him kneeling before her throne during a border alliance, dark hair falling into his eyes, smile perfect and disarming. "My queen," he had said, voice low and reverent. "Let me stand at your side." She had felt the mate pull instantly, sharp, undeniable, like a thread tying her heart to his. Their mating ceremony under the full moon, the pack gathered in a circle of torches, elders chanting ancient words, her in white silk, him in black leather. He had taken her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles, and sworn before the moon and the pack, "I will always protect you, Rhaenys, with my life, with my wolf, forever." Sweet moments flooded in, lazy mornings tangled in furs, his fingers tracing lazy circles on her back while she laughed at his teasing. Moonlit runs through the pines, racing until he caught her, pinning her gently against a tree, kissing her until she forgot the weight of the crown. Nights when he held her after long council meetings, whispering that she was stronger than any king who had ever ruled. She believed him. Then the dream twisted. The cliff edge again, blindfold tight, his hands on her shoulders, warm at first, then hard. "I'm sorry." The shove, the endless fall, wind tearing at her red hair, the river rising like a black mouth, cold slamming into her, stealing breath, stealing hope. Her mother's voice echoing one last time, "Trust, but never blindly." She hit the water and woke. Rhaenys bolted upright, gasping, chest heaving as though she had truly surfaced from drowning. The brazier had died to embers. The room was dark except for the faint gray light creeping under the door. Her cheeks were wet, hot tracks of tears she hadn't felt falling. She touched her face, fingers trembling, and realized she was crying, quiet, steady sobs that shook her shoulders. Not the wild screams from before, something deeper, quieter. The morning of departure dawned cold and clear, the sky a pale steel gray over the Riverfang courtyard. Rhaenys stepped out into the open air wearing the armor Gwen had given her, dark steel plates curving perfectly to her petite frame, etched with snarling river wolves that caught the first light and threw it back in silver flashes. The breastplate sat light but unyielding against her chest, greaves hugging her calves, a fitted leather skirt allowing every stride. Her red hair was pulled into a tight, high ponytail that swung like a flame behind her as she walked, hazel eyes burning with a quiet, lethal focus that made even the seasoned warriors straighten instinctively. She stood before the assembled soldiers, 20 strong, black-armored, weapons gleaming, and spoke in a voice that carried without shouting. "We ride the old Eastern Ridge Trail," she said, tracing the invisible path in the air with one gloved hand. "It's smooth, hidden by the pines for most of the way, cuts 2 hours off the main road.
We stay off the open paths until the final descent into Silver Peak Valley. No fires, no stops longer than water breaks. We arrive exactly when the horns sound for his coronation. We move fast, we move quiet, and when we reach the hall,
we end this." The warriors nodded as one, fists thumping chests in silent agreement. Rhaenys met their eyes, each one, and felt the weight of their trust settle on her shoulders like the armor itself. She turned to the waiting carriage, climbed in without another word, and the column moved out at a steady trot, wolves loping alongside in shadow form, the mountain wind carrying the scent of pine and coming snow. Hours later, they reached the edge of Silver Peak lands. The pines thickened into a dense green wall. The warriors guided the carriage deep into the grove, concealing it beneath low-hanging branches until it vanished from sight. They dismounted, crouched low among the trees, and waited in absolute silence. No one spoke. No one shifted. Only the distant call of birds and the slow rhythm of their breathing filled the space. Then it came, the long, mournful blast of horns from the valley below, echoing off the ridges. The coronation had begun. Rhaenys rose first. She gave the signal, a single sharp nod, and the warriors flowed forward like shadows detaching from the trees. They slipped through the familiar forest she had once run as a child, every root and turn etched into her bones. The scent of home hit her, smoke from hearth fires, damp earth, the faint tang of pine sap, and it twisted the knife of betrayal deeper. As they neared the great hall, her own guards stationed at the outer perimeter caught sight of her first. Helmets turned, eyes widened beneath visors. One dropped his spear in shock, another fell to his knees, whispering her name like a prayer. Word spread in ripples, pack members emerging from doorways, hunters pausing mid-step, children pointing until the courtyard filled with gasps and bowed heads, joy and disbelief crashing together. But Rhaenys never slowed. Her boots struck the stone path with steady purpose, ponytails swinging, hazel eyes fixed straight ahead, rage roaring through her veins like wildfire. Inside her chest, her wolf howled, fierce, mourning, alive. The massive doors to the great hall loomed before them, carved oak banded with iron, symbols of the Silver Peak line etched deep. 2 guards flanked them, frozen in confusion. Rhaenys didn't hesitate. She lifted one booted foot and kicked. The doors exploded inward with a thunderous crack, wood splintering, iron groaning as they slammed back against the walls. The sound rolled through the hall like thunder, silencing every voice inside. Rhaenys strode into the hall, red ponytail swinging like a banner of war, hazel eyes colder than the river that had almost killed her. The massive doors still shuddered from the impact of her kick, the echo rolling through the vaulted space like distant thunder. Every head turned in a single stunned wave, elders in their fur-trimmed robes, warriors gripping spear shafts, maids clutching aprons, children half hidden behind parents. The air itself seemed to thicken, scented with pine smoke from the great hearths, roasted meat from the abandoned feast tables, and the sharp tang of fear. The elder at the center of the dais, gray-bearded, hands trembling, held the golden crown of the Silver Peak midair. His fingers loosened. The circlet slipped, tumbling in slow, gleaming arcs before it struck the stone floor with a high, ringing clatter that cut through the silence like glass shattering. Alex stood frozen on the raised platform, dressed in kingly robes of deep crimson and silver embroidery that had once belonged to Rhaenys's father. The fabric hung on him perfectly, as if tailored for betrayal. His dark hair was swept back, face pale beneath the torchlight, mouth half open in a sound that never came. Beside him, standing too close, hand resting lightly on his arm, was Elsa. Her blonde hair was braided with silver threads, a queen's circlet already resting on her brow. Was the same gentle smile she had once worn while braiding Rhaenys's hair, now frozen into something brittle and guilty. The woman who had been her closest friend, her confidant, her sister in every way but blood. The entire hall dropped to their knees in a rustle of fabric and clink of armor, except the two traitors. Alex and Elsa remained standing, exposed on the dais like statues caught in the wrong story. Rhaenys stopped at the foot of the steps, boots planted wide, armor glinting darkly. Her wolf surged inside her chest, mourning, raging, alive, and the sound came out in a low, involuntary growl that vibrated through the hall. "Why?" she asked. One word, soft, sharp, a blade sliding between ribs. Neither of them could speak. Alex's throat worked, eyes darting from her face to the floor, then back again, searching for the lie that had always saved him before. Elsa's lips parted, but only a small, broken sound escaped. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Rhaenys waited. Let it burn them. Then she lifted her chin, voice carrying clear and final. "Guards!" Her own warriors, those who had knelt moments ago, rose as one, spears leveled, faces hard with dawning fury and fierce loyalty. They moved without hesitation. "Take them!" Rhaenys ordered. "Alex, Elsa, and the elder who was about to place that crown on a murderer's head, straight to the dungeons, now!" The guards surged forward, hands clamped on arms. Alex struggled once, wild, desperate, then went still when a spear tip pressed against his throat. Elsa cried out, voice cracking, reaching for Rhaenys as though the old bond could still reach across the betrayal. "Rhaenys, please, listen!" Rhaenys did not look at her. She walked past them without a backward glance, ponytails swaying, steps measured and unhurried. Their screams followed her. Alex's hoarse pleas, Elsa's broken sobs, the elder's wheezing protests, echoing off the stone walls like the dying cries of a lie finally exposed. She reached the throne at the far end of the hall, her throne, and turned to face the kneeling pack. The room was hers again. But the ache in her chest, the place where two bonds had once burned, still throbbed like an open wound. She drew a slow breath, hazel eyes sweeping the bowed heads. "Rise," she said quietly. They all rose. And in that moment, the Red Queen returned. Not broken, not forgiving, unforgiving and very much alive. Once the hall was cleared, traitors dragged away screaming, doors barred against the curious crowd, Rhaenys walked the length of the dais and sat on her throne again. The carved oak seat welcomed her like an old friend, cool against the steel of her armor, familiar grooves worn by years of her own weight. She leaned back slowly, red ponytail draped over one shoulder, hazel eyes sweeping the room. The elders remained kneeling in a loose semicircle before her, heads bowed, hands clasped tight to hide their trembling. Torchlight danced across their lined faces, catching the silver threads in their beards and the fear in their eyes. She let the silence stretch until it pressed against their chests like a hand. Then she spoke, voice low and even, each word deliberate. "I could have your heads for even touching my crown," she said. "For placing it on a murderer's brow while my pyre smoke still lingered in your memories. But I will not take them. Yet. Not until I hear from your own mouths what story you were fed. Speak." The eldest, gray-haired Thorn, the same man who had once taught her the borders as a child, lifted his head first. His voice cracked on the first word, then steadied. "The day after your birthday, my queen, Alex returned alone. He stumbled into the hall at dawn, clothes torn, blood on his face. His own, he said. He told us you had been ambushed on the mountain path, kidnapped by raiders from a rival pack, that he had fought them off but barely escaped with his life. He wept before us, swore he would never stop searching until you were found." Rhaenys's fingers curled around the throne's arms, knuckles whitening beneath the gloves. She said nothing. Just let him continue. We searched, Thorne went on, for months. Every ridge, every valley, every shadow trail. Scouts rode to the borders of 3 packs. Nothing. Then, one morning, a white wolf body was delivered at the eastern boundary. Almost identical to yours. Same size, same silver-tipped fur, a note pinned to its throat. She refused to obey her captors. She died for it. We believed it was you. A murmur rippled through the kneeling elders. Regret, shame, the sound of men who had failed their queen. We buried the body with full rites, Thorne continued, voice dropping. The pyre burned for 3 days. The pack mourned. We mourned. With no heir, no sign of your return, we had no choice but to consider the throne vacant. Alex pressed his claim. He said he had been your chosen consort, that the bond still lived in him. After long debate, we agreed. We prepared the coronation for today. Rhaenys listened in perfect silence. The words washed over her like cold water, each one familiar, each one a lie she could now see clearly. The mate bond she had once thought unbreakable, the golden thread that had pulled her heart to Alex's every full moon, now felt like ash in her chest, dry, dead, silenced not by time or distance, but by pure, burning hatred that left no room for anything else. She drew a slow breath through her nose, tasting the smoke of the hearths, the faint iron of old blood on the stone floor. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, almost gentle. You buried a stranger's body and called it mine. Thorne bowed his head lower. We did, my queen. We failed you. You trusted the man who murdered me, she said. Was the words soft but edged like a blade drawn slow. You let him wear my father's robes. You let him stand where I stood. You let him crown himself on the strength of my supposed death. No one answered. There was nothing left to say. Rhaenys rose from the throne, slow, deliberate. Stand, she commanded. He did, unsteady, eyes wide. The Silver Peak lives, she said, and so do I. In 1 week we hold a general meeting in the square. Every soul in this pack will hear what happened. Every soul will witness judgment. Until then, you will serve as you always have, loyally, silently, without question. If I find one whisper of disloyalty, one hint that any of you knew more than you claim, I will remember my ancestors' vow. She let the threat hang, unspoken but heavy. But then she turned and walked toward the side doors that led to her private chambers, ponytails swaying with each step. Behind her, the elders remained standing, silent, shaken, and, for the first time in years, truly afraid of the queen they had once underestimated. For the next week, Rhaenys threw herself into queenly duties with a ferocity that left no room for rest or reflection. She rose before dawn, strapped on her armor, and moved through the Silver Peak like a storm reclaiming its territory. Council meetings stretched long into the night, elders presenting border reports, harvest yields, patrol rotations, her hazel eyes sharp, questions cutting, decisions final. She rode the training fields at first light, sparring with warriors until sweat soaked her tunic and muscles burned, proving to every doubting gaze that the Red Queen had returned unbroken. Border patrols became personal. She led them herself, riding the ridges she had once fallen from, scanning the horizon for any sign of lingering threats, her wolf ever alert inside her chest. The pack watched her with a mixture of awe and quiet fear. Whispers followed her through the halls. She's colder now. Stronger. Alive when we buried her. No one dared speak it to her face. One afternoon, when the sun hung low and golden over the valley, Rhaenys walked alone to the dungeons. The stone steps descended into cool shadow, torchlight flickering on damp walls that smelled of iron and regret. Guards bowed as she passed, unlocking the heavy iron gate without a word. She stepped into Elsa's cell, small, a barred window high on the wall letting in a single shaft of dying light. and sat on the rough wooden visiting chair that faced the narrow cot. Elsa sat curled against the far wall, knees drawn to her chest, blonde hair tangled and dull, once silver braids now frayed. Tear streaks carved clean paths down her dirt-smudged cheeks. She looked smaller than Rhaenys remembered. Fragile, hollowed out. Rhaenys simply looked at her for a long moment. Really looked. At the woman who had braided her hair on quiet evenings, shared secrets under moonlit pines, laughed with her until dawn. At the woman who had stood beside Alex on the dais, wearing a queen's circlet that had never been hers. Elsa, she said softly. The name hung between them like a broken promise. Elsa lifted her head slowly. Fresh tears welled and spilled as their eyes met. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again, voice raw and trembling. I fell in love with him long ago, she whispered. Before you even knew he existed. I watched him watch you, and it tore me apart every day. When he came back, when he said you were gone, he asked me to stand beside him, to be his queen. I said yes. I thought it was fate finally stepping in. I thought you were truly dead, I really did. Her breath hitched. But I swear on the moon, Rhaenys, I never knew he planned to kill you. I never knew he pushed you. If I had known... The words trailed into silence. Elsa's shoulders shook with quiet sobs. Rhaenys sat motionless, hands resting on her knees, armor still strapped tight from the morning's patrol. She felt the tears come, hot, silent, sliding down her own cheeks without permission. Not rage this time. Not hatred. Something quieter, deeper. Grief for the friendship that had once felt like family, for the trust she had given so freely to two people who had chosen each other over her. She stood slowly. The chair scraped against stone. Elsa reached out instinctively, fingers trembling toward her. Rhaenys, please. Rhaenys turned without answering. She walked to the cell door, steps measured, ponytail swaying once. The guard outside pulled the heavy iron open at her nod. Elsa's voice broke behind her. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The door clanged shut with a final hollow ring, echoing down the corridor, sealing the past behind bars. Rhaenys paused in the dim stairwell, one hand pressed to the cold stone wall. Tears still fell, but she did not wipe them away. She let them trace silent paths down her face, let the ache bloom full in her chest. Then she drew a breath, deep, steady, and climbed the steps back into the light. The pack waited above. Duties waited. The day of the general meeting arrived under a clear, merciless sky, the kind that made every shadow sharp and every face impossible to hide. The entire Silver Peak pack gathered in the great square, hundreds of wolves and humans alike, filling the wide stone expanse ringed by timber longhouses and tall pines. Mothers held children close, elders leaned on staffs, warriors stood shoulder to shoulder in their leathers, all eyes fixed on the raised platform at the center. Rhaenys stood alone at the edge of it, dressed in her queen's armor, the dark steel plates etched with river wolves polished until they caught the sun like black mirrors. Her red hair hung loose today, falling in heavy waves past her shoulders, and stirred by the light breeze. Her hazel eyes were steady, unblinking, the fire in them banked but not extinguished. A low murmur rippled through the crowd as she stepped forward. Silence fell when she raised one gloved hand. No preamble, no speech of welcome. She drew a small ceremonial dagger from her belt, silver blade, handle wrapped in worn leather, and without hesitation sliced a clean line across her left palm. Blood welled immediately, bright red against pale skin. She turned her hand over the ancient stone slab at the platform's center, the same slab where bonds had been sworn and broken for generations, and let the drops fall, one by one, dark spots blooming on the gray surface. The pack held its breath. Rhaenys closed her eyes for a single heartbeat. Inside her chest, the old mate bond, once golden, yet once warm, twisted like a dying snake. She felt it fray, thread by thread, until the last strand snapped with a pain so sharp it stole her air. Her wolf howled once, low and final, mourning what had been stolen from them both. When she opened her eyes again, the bond was gone. Ash. Nothing. She straightened, blood still dripping slowly from her palm, and faced her people. "Alex," she said, voice carrying clear across the square. "Former consort, traitor to the Silver Peak, will remain my prisoner in the deepest dungeon until the day he dies. He will see no light. He will hear no voices. He will live long enough to remember what he took and what he lost." A ripple of gasps and low growls moved through the crowd. Some heads bowed in agreement. Others looked toward the keep where the dungeons waited. Rhaenys's gaze shifted to the side. Where guards held Elsa in chains at the platform's edge. The blonde woman's hair hung limp, face streaked with tears, queen's finery replaced by simple gray prisoner's garb. She trembled, eyes wide and pleading. "Elsa," Rhaenys continued, voice unchanging, "former friend, accomplice to treason, will be exiled at sunrise. She will leave these lands and never set foot on Silver Peak soil again. If she returns, she will be met with death, no trial, no mercy." Elsa collapsed to her knees on the stone, chains rattling. A sob tore from her throat, raw and broken. "Rhaenys, please, I beg you, listen to me. I didn't know. I loved you. I still—" Her words dissolved into weeping, hands reaching toward the platform as though she could still cross the distance that betrayal had carved between them. Rhaenys looked down at her. For a moment, just a heartbeat, something flickered in those hazel eyes. The ghost of old laughter shared under moonlight, secrets whispered in the dark, the warmth of a sister she had once called family. Then it vanished. Her face never softened. She turned away, ponytail swaying once, and addressed the pack again. "This is judgment," she said simply. "Not vengeance, justice. The Silver Peak endures because we protect what is ours. Let no one forget what happens when that protection is betrayed." She lifted her bleeding palm one last time, letting the last drops fall onto the stone. "The meeting is concluded." The crowd remained silent as she descended the platform steps, armor whispering with each movement. Guards moved to escort Elsa away. Her cries followed Rhaenys across the square like fading echoes. Rhaenys did not look back. She walked toward the keep, red hair catching the sun, hazel eyes fixed on the horizon. A week after the general meeting, the Silver Peak keep still hummed with the afterglow of the full moon feast. The great square had rung with drums and laughter long into the night, fires roaring, meat roasting on spits, wolves shifting and running under the moon in joyful packs, the air thick with pine smoke and relief. Rhaenys had stayed until the last embers died, raising a cup to her people, letting them see her smile, small, real, unbroken. She had danced once, barefoot on the stone, red hair loose and wild, letting the rhythm pull the last traces of dungeon chill from her bones. Her pack had cheered louder for that one dance than for any crown she had ever worn. Now the keep was quiet again. Dawn had not yet broken. The halls were dark except for the soft glow of a single lantern in her private study. Rhaenys sat at the heavy oak desk that had once belonged to her mother, the same desk where she had signed her first border treaties as queen. A fresh sheet of parchment lay before her, inkpot open, quill already wet. She wore a simple linen tunic tonight, no armor, no crown, just the faint silver scar across her palm from the unbinding ritual, catching the lantern light like a thin crescent moon. She wrote the first letter slowly, each word deliberate. To Darius. She thanked him, plainly, without flourish, for the soldiers who had ridden at her side, for the armor that had fit like a second skin, for the bargain that had given her back her throne. She told him the Silver Peak stood strong again, that the traitor rotted in the dark as he deserved, that the pack no longer whispered of her death. Then she paused, quill hovering. and added the truth she had not spoken aloud to anyone else. You saw me when I was half drowned and chained. You chose respect over gold. I will not forget it. The day may come when you call in what I owe. When it does, I will honor the oath I swore. Until then, may your borders stay quiet and your wolves run free. She signed it simply, Rhaenys. She folded the parchment, sealed it with a drop of red wax stamped with the snarling wolf of her line, and set it aside. The second letter came easier, warmer, to Gwen. She wrote of the armor first, how it had felt like wearing courage itself when she kicked open the hall doors. She wrote of the hug in the courtyard that night before departure, how it had been the first touch in over a year that had not carried betrayal. She wrote that friendship born in a prison cell was rarer than any crown, and stronger for it. She invited her, not as a diplomat but as a friend, to visit the Silver Peak when the snows melted, to run the ridges together under the moon, to share honey wine and stories without chains between them. She ended with the same promise she had given Darius, but softer. If the day comes when you need something from me, anything, send word. I owe you more than gold or soldiers. I owe you belief when I had none left. She signed it. Your friend, Rhaenys. She folded and sealed that one too, the wax cooling under her thumb. Rising, she crossed to the small bell pull by the door. A quiet knock answered almost immediately. One of her trusted runners slipped inside, bowing low. Take these, Rhaenys said, handing him the letters. Fast riders. One to Riverfang's stronghold, one to Lady Gwen personally. No delays. The runner nodded, took the parchments, and vanished into the shadowed hall. Rhaenys stood alone in the study for a moment longer, lantern flame flickering across her face, then turned toward the window. Outside, the first gray light of dawn crept over the mountains. She drew a slow breath, feeling the weight of the week lift just a fraction. Then she blew out the lantern. The room went dark, and the letters were on their way. 3 nights later, under the same full moon that had watched her fall, Rhaenys stood at the edge of the same cliff where Alex had pushed her. The wind howled low and mournful, tugging at her loose red hair, carrying the distant thump of feast drums from the valley below. Her pack celebrating her return, laughter and howls rising like smoke. She had slipped away from the bonfires and the wine, leaving the warmth of the square behind without a word to anyone. No guards, no company, just her, the armor traded for a simple black cloak over a linen tunic, boots planted firm on the rocky lip. The drop yawned before her, black and endless, the river far below a silver ribbon under the moon's cold gaze. The same river that had tried to claim her. The same wind that had torn at her blindfold as she fell. She could still feel the exact spot where his hands had pressed, right between her shoulder blades, the betrayal branded into her skin like a scar that never healed. She doesn't know if she'll ever trust again, but the heart doesn't always care. She closed her eyes. Memories came unbidden, unwanted, soft at first, then sharp enough to cut. She allowed herself mourn it one final time. Alex's laugh in the moonlight clearing where they first felt the pull, the way his fingers had tangled in her hair as he kissed her like she was the only thing in the world worth breathing for. The way he had sworn on that very moon, on their mating night, his voice low and fervent. I will protect you always, Rhaenys. No harm will touch you while I breathe. The sweet lies they had lived together. Quiet mornings when he brought her tea laced with honey, moonlit runs where he let her win just to see her smile, nights when he held her after council fights and whispered that she was stronger than any king who had ever ruled. Every word a blade he had sharpened in secret, every touch a step toward this cliff. She tried to think back and see if she could pick up on when Alex started plotting. Did he even love her, or was it all a farce? Her wolf stirred inside her chest, quiet, wounded but no longer whimpering. It remembered the fall, too, the terror, the cold, the moment the bond had flickered and nearly died. but it also remembered the river spitting her back out. Alive. Changed. Rhaenys opened her eyes. Hazel fire blazed in them now, bright, unyielding, the color of embers that refused to be extinguished. She stepped closer to the edge, toes curling over the drop, wind whipping her cloak like dark wings. Below, the river rushed on, indifferent, as if it had never tried to drown her. Above, the full moon hung heavy and silver, the same witness to her betrayal and her survival. She lifted her chin, let the wind tear the last traces of grief from her lungs. "I survived you," she whispered to the night, voice steady, carrying over the edge like a vow. "And I will never fall again." The drums in the distance swelled, a heartbeat of celebration that echoed her own. Her pack waited below, alive because she was, stronger because she had come back. Rhaenys turned from the cliff, ponytail catching the moonlight one last time, and walked back toward the path that led home. The moon watched her go, silent, approving, and somewhere far below, in the deepest dungeon of the Silver Peak Keep, a man who had once been her mate screamed her name into the dark, knowing she would never answer. Rhaenys did not hear him. She no longer cared to. She had a pack to lead, a throne to hold, and a future that belonged to her alone.